Growing up as a kid, you always heard about the Cold War and the arms race. Well, it's kind of been an arms race in the cyber world. Let me explain. So 7, 8 years ago, we ended up with something new called ransomware, which is where the bad guys would trick you into installing some software, clicking a link to deliver a malicious payload, which then encrypted your files. Scott, what do you mean by encrypted? Basically, it scrambles up the files, and if you don't have the key or the encryption key to open the file, you're out of luck. And oh yeah, to get that key, you needed to pay money. So when this first happened, it was kind of eye-opening for us IT guys, like, whoa, where'd this come from? This is interesting, but it was more of an annoyance, and we were able to easily get around it. Well, the bad guys went, hey, there's some money to be made here, and they upped their game. So they got it to the point that if you didn't have a good backup, you were out of luck. So guys like myself would make sure that there was a rock-solid backup solution in place. And if you happen to get hit by ransomware, we would just get the files back from the backup, and you keep going. Now, it's a bigger pain in the butt. There's some downtime as you recover files, but you still didn't lose anything. And you didn't have to pay the ransom. Well, the bad guys caught on to that and went, well, wait a minute. Instead of like just getting on there and running ransomware, what if we installed a backdoor into the system? Then we could start looking around the network. We could steal some data. Well, actually, before we got to the stealing data, they would get in and they sniff around. They'd find the backup solution. They were deleting the backups and letting that go for a few weeks. And then they would do the ransomware so you couldn't get the files to the backup because they were gone. All right. Then they started hey, they did that, but some people still weren't paying. Then they got to stealing the data, taking it off site. So what that looked like was, I'm a hacker, I got on your system, I stole some data, I took it off site, I launched the ransomware attack to kind of cover my tracks and to try to generate the revenue. You get ransomware and you go, my IT guy's got my back, he's got it on backups, we're not going to pay, we'll just restore our data. Okay. Bad guys upped the game and said, well, Mr. Victim, we happen to be on your network and we stole the data and we took it off site. And if you don't pay us the ransom we're demanding, we're going to start releasing your client's information out on the internet. Basically, they were looking to use shame, fear of you having to admit that for whatever reason, a lot of people look at it and say, were you irresponsible or were you careless that you fell victim to the ransomware attack? Cybercrime is, I think, the only crime in the world where the victim doesn't really get sympathy. They get that question of, what did you do wrong to allow this to happen? Okay. So let's unpack that again. They get in, they stole the data, they launched the ransomware. You restore your data, you don't pay the ransom. The bad guys say, hey, pay us or we're going to start releasing the data. Well, big companies that were getting hit, and we started seeing trends with smaller companies, when they would get that follow-up email saying, we're going to tell the world what happened here, well, they started coming clean and getting out in front of it. And they would use press people, and they'd put the spin on it and the proper information, and they would present it to the public. Okay, this is what happened. We suffered this terrible event. Look at us. We're the victims, and this is what we're doing to go further. Taking that power away from the bad guys, right? So now the bad guys can't really use that threat of we're going to out you if you've just outed yourself. All right. Well, the latest trend that we've been seeing it, but it hadn't been very widespread, but I saw it locally yesterday. So it was an oil company, a division of one of the big companies. It appears they got ransomware in that same scenario. The bad guys got in, they were there for a while, they stole data, they launched the ransomware attack. The oil company says, nah, we're not paying. Bad guys say, hey, we're going to out you. Oil company says, no, you're not. We're going to out ourselves. And they're able to get out in front of it using media and lawyers and their people. And they put a spin on it. And the bad guys go, oh, yeah, Mr. Oil Company? You think that's going to do it to us? Well, didn't they start taking that stolen data and get people's email addresses out of it? And now they're emailing the victims, the true victims, the end users. So if my name happened to have been in the database, I would have gotten an email from the hackers saying, hey, just so you're aware, and to validate what I'm telling you is true, here's some links to the news stories, to the media. We hacked that oil company. Not only did we hack them, and their security wasn't great, we stole data from that company. And their security wasn't great, and they didn't realize that. Then we ransomwared them and encrypted all the files so they couldn't have access to it. And we told them they had to pay us. They didn't pay us. We told them that we were going to announce it to the world. They went to the media. So guess what, Mr. Victim? If you don't want your data that we stole from the oil company to get released on the internet, you need to contact the oil company and tell them to pay us. So basically now what they're doing, if you follow that bouncing ball, rather ingenious, they're now contacting the ultimate victims, the people whose data was stolen. All right, so the oil company were the caretakers of this data, and it was stolen, and now the people whose information has been leaked, has been gotten by the bad guys, they're getting contacted by the bad guys saying, hey, look, we're going to release your stuff if you don't get the oil company to pay. They're basically using peer pressure of the ultimate victims to bully the oil company into paying. Mind blown. Talk about how we went from 8 years ago with some guy having figured out how to encrypt files and hold them hostage, and we're demanding a $49 payment that we security guys were able to overcome and get the data back easily. Through the progression over the years of how they continue building on this, to now we're at the point where they're sitting inside the network, they're stealing the data, they're doing the ransom, they're threatening to out them, because, again, why would they out them? Think about it. In Canada, there's privacy breach laws. The U.S. has got some very strict laws as well, as does Europe. So they're saying, hey, we're going to out you. Now you're going to have to deal with all the litigations and the government and potential fines and all that stuff, or pay us. And when the companies decide, no, we're not paying, because you really shouldn't, even if you pay, they're bad guys. Chances are they're still going to release the data or do other things to generate money. So, pay at your own peril. I think the last time I looked at the stats, the FBI was saying 2 out of 5 times you pay it and you don't get the stuff back anyways. I digress. We're now to the point where they threaten to out them, and when somebody comes clean on their own, they're now going after the end user victims and saying, hey, that company really sucked with their security. We got into it, and look at all the bad publicity that's happening in the news. If you don't believe me as the hacker, there it is in the news. They're saying that this happened, and now we've got your data. And if you don't want it out, you better contact them to have them pay us. Peer pressure. How we have gotten, as I said, from $49 and easy to overcome to, oh my goodness, peer pressure. The technology side of me goes, hey, I wonder what the next step is. But I really don't want to know. 2020 has been a challenging enough year for most of us, I think we can admit. But now we've got the bad guys have upped the game yet again. What are you doing to make sure you're protecting your company and your clients and their data so that you can avoid having all this stuff happening to you to begin with? That's the key. Trying to keep them out before something like this happens to you. Hey, thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll talk to you again soon.